This is a guided walkthrough for the VulNyx 0 machine, and let's start. So everybody, the first thing I like to do when I do these hacking walkthroughs is I like to do a scan. So the scan is going to be using Nmap, and Nmap is a program that can be used to determine what open ports there are on a particular server out on the network. So the Nmap scan is going to use these arguments over here. So there's -p- to scan against all ports, -vv for very verbose output, which is going to return before the scan actually finishes, -t4, which means that it's going to run fast but not too fast, and I'm going to run common scripts against whatever services we find with the -S and versioning information with the -S over here. So when we run the scan, we see that there are 2 ports open on the machine. We see that there is port 22 and port 80. And if we take a look at the Nmap output over here, we see that port 22 is running OpenSSH version 8.4, and port 80 is running an Apache web server with version 2.4.56. So these are both relatively up-to-date versions, so we're not going to be able to exploit that software directly. Oh, there was another port. I didn't see that port. Okay. So we also have port 8080. So port 8080 is reportedly a PHP CLI server with version 5.5. So I'm actually not very familiar with PHP CLI, but what we can do is we can run a little scan on it to figure out what's going on. So the scanner I'm going to use is called Nikto, and Nikto is a web app vulnerability scanner. The vulnerability scanner is going to scan the web server that on this particular port and try to figure out if there's anything insecure that's going on there. It usually comes back pretty fast, but then again, I'm running it with some extra arguments. One interesting detail that comes back immediately is that the web server software is kind of unusual. So it's reporting this right here, PHP 8.1 dev. So this strikes me as strange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that version, copy this output, and then I'm going to go to another tab, and I'm going to search and see if there's any known exploits for this version of PHP. So I'm going to do that with I'm going to enter my temp directory. I'm going to run searchsploit, and searchsploit is a search tool that's connected to exploit.db, which is a website with a lot of different exploits for different software versions. So I'm going to see if this version of PHP has an exploit available for it. Okay, so we see here that there is an exploit associated with this version of PHP, and it's called user agent remote code execution. So remote code execution is a very big deal. It basically means that we can run whatever commands we want on this particular web server, and we have this exploit over here, which we can actually copy over to our own directory. So we're going to do that by running searchsploit with the m command, which is going to copy over whatever exploit number that we specify. So it's going to be 39933. It tells us the name of the exploit, and then it's going to show us the file location over here. So we've got this exploit right here. What we want to do is we want to examine it. So this is a Python script. So we're just going to open it up in Nano. So we can read all about it here. So it is PHP 8.1.0 dev, user agent remote code execution. And it says here it's an early release of PHP. The PHP 8.1.0 dev version was released with a backdoor on March 28, 2021. But the backdoor was quickly discovered. The following exploit uses the backdoor to provide a pseudo shell on the host. Okay, so we've got our exploit code over here. This is Python 3. It's importing the OS, the RE, and the requests modules. These are very common. And we see what the exploit script is doing is it's actually sending a special user agent HTTP header with this over here, and then we supply a command to be run along with it. So that's how it works. What we're going to do is we're going to exit out of the script, exit out of Nano rather, and then we're going to try running the script. So I'm going to do python 4993.py. It's going to ask us to enter the full host URL. So the host URL in this case is going to be HTTP 10.02.60, I think it is. Let me look that up really quick. So 10.02.60, right? Okay. And this is going to be port 8080. Okay. So after we've sent this, we actually get an interactive shell opened on the vulnerable web server. So we've got a web shell basically. New ls. We see index.php. Okay. If we ask who we are with the whoami command, it says we're root. So this is actually a big win. We would think it would be a really big win for us, but let me explain what's actually going on here. Okay, so what we're talking about today is we're talking about Docker container pen testing. So what is Docker? Docker is a software that is used to deploy lightweight containers which contain everything required to run specific pieces of software. Docker containers can be used to run web servers, and if a user is able to get CLI access to a Docker web server, there are a number of ways to break out of the container. And escaping the container environment and gaining access to the Docker host is commonly known as a Docker escape. After gaining access to the web server via the PHP exploit, we find that we're running as the root user, but we shouldn't get too excited because we're in a Docker container. The first big indicator that we're in a Docker container is the presence of a .docker env file in the top level directory. So we see here that there is the presence of this file in the top level directory. And the second big indicator is that there are no processes running on the system. Docker containers often have very few running processes. So let's confirm that. So over here, if we do ls.la on the top level directory, we see that there's this docker.docker env file. So this is an indication that we're operating inside of a Docker container. So we can also run this command, ps aux, to see all of the running processes on the system. And because we're the root user, there should be no processes hidden from us. When we run this command, there are no running processes. So these two indicators tell us that we're working inside of a Docker container environment. So in this container, our escape method is finding an open.bash history file in the root directory. So usually the .bash history file contains a history of all of the bash commands, all of the command history that has been run by that particular user, in this case, the root user. So the file's contents include credentials, so we can log into the server directly as the Liam user using SSH. So when we look at the contents of the .bash history file, we see that it's run this command over here, ssh pass, with this password over here as the user Liam. So this is a username and a password. It's a set of credentials, and we're going to use these credentials to break into the server more directly than the Docker container. We actually can't break out of this Docker container. It's the settings don't let us do that, but because there are these credentials lying around, we can escape that way. So let's do that. So it is in the root directory. There's the bash history file over here, and let's read that. So this is going to be cat/root/.bash_history. And we've got these credentials right here as the Liam user. So we're just going to copy the password over here, and then in another shell, another tab rather, we're going to log in as the Liam user to the web server. It's going to ask us for the password. We just copied it, so we're just going to paste. And now we're in. So we're actually in. So this is our legit SSH shell. Let me just put on my voice changer, because we like to put on our scary hacker voice when we break into web servers.
Hey everybody, this is my scary hacker voice. This is the voice we use when we break into web servers. We like to put on the scary hacker voice and say, "We're in."
Okay, so we've just broken into the web server over here. The first thing I like to do after getting initial access on a box using SSH or any other service is I like to run the sudo-l command to figure out if our current user can run any sudo commands. So sudo commands are commands run with elevated privileges. It says over here that user Liam may run the following commands on 0. So 0 is the name of the box. As root with no password, you can use the user bin wine program. So is anybody here familiar with the wine program? If you're not, we're going to be explaining what the wine program does in just a second. So this is how we're doing privilege escalation on this machine. So we can use the wine program with sudo. And what wine is a Linux Unix program which is used to run Windows programs on a Linux Unix system. So basically, if you've got some Windows program that you really want to run inside of your Linux environment, you can use the wine program to do that. So if we can run sudo with the wine command, then we can open a Windows shell with root access using the command illustrated above. So we run sudo with wine, and then we open up a command terminal. So the only problem with this is that we have to use Windows terminal commands in this shell. So for example, we have to use the dir command instead of ls, we have to use the type command instead of cat, etc. So let's demonstrate that. So it's going to be sudo wine cmd. So it says, looks like wine32 is missing, you should install it. But we also get this prompt over here. So this is a Windows prompt, Windows terminal prompt. We can tell from the backslashes instead of slashes. So if we ask who am I, it says we're 0 root. So we can run this fun redeem as well.
What are you? I'm system root.
So okay, because we're the root user, we can basically access anything we want on the system. So we can use the cd command and just go to the root directory. and then we're in the root directory. So this shell is a little bit wonky. Can't use the ls command, we have to use the dir command. Okay, so we see here that there's the root.txt file that we need to read to finish the exercise, but we're actually not going to read this in the traditional way because we want to respect the wishes of the VulNyx organizers who don't want their machines to have their flags read in video walkthroughs or write-ups on their machines. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the type command to read the file, but we're going to redirect the output of the file into a file called iReadRoot.txt. And when we do that, we see that iReadRoot.txt is in the folder, and it's the same size as the root.txt file, so we've basically finished the exercise by quote-unquote reading the file and redirecting it to another file over here. Okay, and with that, we're done. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching this walkthrough for the Zero machine over at VulNyx, and we'll see you next time.
Hey there, HackerFrogs! Are you enjoying this workshop? Learning new concepts and skills? If so, there's a way you can support the channel, and it's totally free. Just click on the subscribe button below the video. Also, click on the like button. And if you have questions or comments on this workshop, please leave them below the video. Thanks for listening. And now, back to our scheduled programming.